Well, if you want to join the police force, you need to pass a test before you can become a recruit. But now the Department of Justice in Washington is telling the Dayton, Ohio Police Department it must lower its standards. And it must welcome even those recruits who got an F on the exam. The DOJ says the move is required because not enough African Americans are making it onto the force. Joining me now, Hillary Shelton is the NAACP's Senior Vice President for Advocacy and Policy. Hillary, thank you so much for being here. So,
thanks for having me.
This is pursuant to a consent decree. I want our viewers to know the Department of Justice under President Bush back in September 2008 went after Dayton because it said it didn't have enough minorities on its police or firefighting forces. So a couple years later, or a year later, under President Obama, they entered into a consent decree where they agreed. They agreed to do more to get African Americans onto the forces. Now the DOJ is walking in saying, you haven't done it, and our solution for you is you must lower the passing score to an F so you can get more minorities on the forces. Does that make sense to you?
Well, let me just say that what they're doing in this particular case is only an 8 to 10% differential in the test pass rate, or pass score.
Right, it used to be you had to get a D, and now you have to get an F.
Well, it's a difference between 8 to 10% is a good way of looking at it. The real question here is whether or not that test actually represents what is necessary to be effective in being able to pass through the academy and becoming an effective police officer. But the Justice Department determined that there's some artificial barriers within this test that are consistent with other problems we've had with discriminatory tests. That is,
so
we've had tests in the past that are set in place.
But that's not what the DOJ is telling them to do. The DOJ is saying under the old standard, you had to get a 66% on one half and a 72% on the other half, and now you have to get a 58% on one half and a 63% on the other. Those are terrible scores.
So we're talking about an 8 to 10% differential. Not knowing exactly all the questions that are on the test would be very helpful for you to know before you make an assessment along those lines.
I don't need to know, just to know that you're telling them if you get an F, you're welcome to the police force.
Ohio has a tremendous problem in the past with actually having tests that have questions on them that have very little to do.
I agree. I don't think that's in dispute. That's why they had to enter into the decree.
I don't. So in this case, what we have is the same kind of problem.
So
we have a
the
test
question is, how do you fix it?
Proven to be, well, you have to reassess the test. Determine exactly what percentage of the test is really necessary to indicate that those who are taking the test will be successful.
So now we're on to something. So reassess the test. Okay, I agree, because if you have a test that has what we call, under the law, a disparate impact on minorities, then you may have an illegal test, right? If it's set up in a way that where the system is sort of rigged, that's not okay. But what they're saying here, Hillary, wait, let me finish. What they're saying here, Hillary, is let's not take another look at the test. Let's just make the people who failed it police officers. Now, does that make sense to you? Because the NAACP local guy, Derek Forward, he's your local president, says we don't support that.
What he is saying we don't support is we don't support them giving anybody just a pass on things along these lines. Race should not be what carries the day. To suggest that the Justice Department hasn't fully reviewed this test, I think, is a misnomer. The Justice Department has had months upon months, as a matter of fact, years if you include the Bush Justice Department, to assess the test and see indeed if there's a problem. The Bush Justice Department and the Obama Justice Department both agree. There's a problem with this test and we have to make the adjustments. And that's exactly what they've done.
Well, let me ask you this, Hillary. Is this paternalistic? I mean, is this paternalistic, this attitude of, well, the African American candidates, they can't pass. There's no test we can come up with that they're going to pass. So what we have to do is make their Fs into Ds.
What you have here is a case in which certainly that test needs to be reassessed and recalibrated. What they're saying is, based upon the test they have in front of them, if you meet this score, only an 8 to 10% differential between the existing test and the previous test.
You're not answering my question. Let's have a real discussion about this.
Let's do that. Ask your question again.
Is it paternalistic for the DOJ to come in and essentially say, you know, the African Americans, they can't pass it. They can't. So we have to take D's and make them, or we have to take F's and make them into D's.
If indeed the Justice Department is doing what you described, then there will be a concern, but that's not what they're doing in this case. What the Justice Department is doing in this case is taking a look at a test. They recognize a history and challenge in the state of Ohio and various cities with tests that are utilized to make sure people are actually should be able to become a police officer, a highway patrolman, with all kind of interesting problems and the kind of tool they utilize to assess your ability to be successful.
But does it worry you at all? Because the guy
who not the case.
The Fraternal Order of Police came out and said this becomes a safety issue if you have an incompetent officer next to you. in a life and death situation. That's a quote. And then there's an African American gentleman by the name of Zachary Williams who wants to be a Dayton police officer. He came out and said, look, this isn't your normal 9-to-5 job. You gotta want it. And I don't want to be in a department where I was hired because of my skin color. I want it because I earned it. I'll give you the last word.
That's exactly right. The whole discussion we're having right now is on whether or not we have a tool that does a good job of assessing the abilities of those who want to be police officers being successful and being able to matriculate through the process. I agree with what they're saying in terms of not wanting to be put out, given a position like this without being first qualified, and second, without being properly trained.
But then you're undermining them when they start
everybody to be that.
with their colleagues.
But this particular case with the Justice Department doesn't come to that conclusion.
Okay.
This particular case with the Justice Department comes to the conclusion that this particular tool is not effective in engaging the ability of those who are taking to be successful.
Sorry, up against a hard break, Hillary. All the best. Thank you so much for coming on. Kelly's Court is next.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.